There's a particular feeling many people carry through their days, quietly, without ever naming it. Not a panic, not a crisis, just a low, persistent hum of unease, a sense that something is wrong, even when, on paper, nothing is. You've probably tried to make it stop, distract it, outrun it, reason it away, numb it, and it keeps coming back because it was never really about the thing you blamed it on. Now, let me be careful here, because this matters. Some anxiety is severe, overwhelming, and medical, and it deserves real support. Nothing in this video replaces that. But there is another layer of anxiety, the quiet, everyday kind, that Carl Jung understood in a way our culture has almost forgotten. He did not see it only as a malfunction to be silenced. He saw it often as a messenger, a signal from a part of you that knows something your conscious mind is refusing to see. By the end of this, you'll understand what that anxiety may be trying to tell you, why silencing it is only half the answer, and how to finally listen to it without being ruled by it. Stay with me. Let's start with the kind of anxiety we're talking about, because it's important to be precise. There is acute anxiety, the racing heart, the panic, the fear with an obvious trigger. And there is something quieter and stranger, a free-floating unease that attaches to nothing in particular. You wake up with it. You feel it in the pause between tasks. You go looking for the cause, the work, the relationship, the news, and none of them quite explain the size of the feeling. Think of Nora, who had, by every external measure, a life to be grateful for. And still, most mornings, she woke with a knot of dread she couldn't trace to anything. She tried everything to get rid of it, and the harder she fought to make it go away, the louder it seemed to get. This is the anxiety Jung found most meaningful, not because it isn't painful, but because it seems to be pointing at something the person cannot yet see. It's diffuse precisely because its real source is unconscious, and a feeling whose cause is hidden from you will always feel like it's coming from nowhere. Why this matters? If your unease won't attach to a clear reason, it may not be irrational. It may be pointing at something you haven't looked at yet. And notice how the mind responds. It goes hunting for a reason. If I feel this bad, something must be threatening me. So it scans and seizes on whatever's nearest. The deadline, the relationship, the state of the world. These become the cause, and we pour our energy into managing them, and still the unease remains, because they were never the real source. The anxiety was speaking a language the thinking mind doesn't read, the older, deeper language of the psyche, which doesn't argue in reasons, but signals in feeling. Trying to reason it away is like answering a smoke alarm with a spreadsheet, and our era is strangely good at producing this particular unease. We are more comfortable, more informed, more optimized than any humans in history, and quietly more anxious. Jung might say that's no accident, a life arranged entirely around safety and productivity, with no room left for meaning, depth, or the inner world, leaves the deeper self starved and alarmed. The comfort is real, but comfort was never what the psyche was most afraid of losing. Now look at how we're taught to deal with this. Our whole culture treats anxiety as a purely mechanical problem, a malfunction to be switched off as fast as possible. Numb it, distract it, manage it, make it stop. And sometimes relief is exactly what's needed. There is no virtue in needless suffering, and for severe anxiety, real treatment can be life-saving. But Jung saw a danger in a culture that only ever silences the symptom and never once asks what it means. Think of anxiety in its meaningful form like a smoke alarm. The alarm is unpleasant. It is not the problem. And if your only response to a smoke alarm is to rip out the batteries, you get silence, and you also get the fire. To only quiet anxiety without ever asking what set it off is to tear out the batteries and call it peace. The feeling may fade for a while, but the thing it was trying to warn you about goes right on burning, unseen. Why this matters now? Relief and understanding are not enemies. You're allowed to soothe the feeling and still be curious about what it came to say. In fact, the two work best together. Calming the nervous system enough to think clearly is often what finally lets you hear what the anxiety is pointing at. Panic can't listen, but a steadier state can. This was never an argument against relief. It's an argument against stopping there, against mistaking a quieted alarm for a solved problem. If this is already naming something you felt, take a second to subscribe. This channel is a slow, honest look at the inner life, with a new piece each week. Now let's keep going. Here is the shift that changes everything, and it's the heart of Jung's view. Jung did not see the symptoms of the psyche as meaningless noise. He saw them as purposeful, the unconscious, unable to speak in words, getting our attention the only way it can, through feeling, through symptom, through the body. Anxiety, in this light, is not the enemy. It's the psyche raising its voice about something that matters. Jung wrote a haunting line about the modern condition. The gods have become diseases, he said. He meant that the deep needs and truths our ancestors once held as sacred haven't vanished. They've gone underground, and when we ignore them long enough, they resurface, disguised as our symptoms. The anxiety in your chest may be a real need, a real truth, a real part of you that has no other way left to reach you. Consider Samuel, who spent years medicating and managing an anxiety he treated purely as a defect, until he finally asked what it was about and realized it had risen precisely around a life he'd built entirely to please everyone but himself. The anxiety wasn't broken. It was the truest thing in him, still trying to be heard. This is a strange and freeing idea, that the thing tormenting you might also be the thing trying to save you. We're so used to seeing anxiety as pure malfunction that it's hard to imagine it holds any intelligence at all. But Jung watched again and again as people's symptoms turned out to be aimed with uncanny precision at exactly the wound, the lie, or the neglected need they most needed to face. The unconscious, he came to believe, is not out to destroy us. Even at its most painful, it is usually trying, clumsily, insistently, to make us whole. Why this matters? Your symptom may be the one part of you still telling the truth. So if anxiety is a signal, what is it so often signaling? Jung's answer, again and again, was some version of the same thing, a life out of alignment with the self. Anxiety tends to rise where you have abandoned yourself, where you're living a life that looks right but isn't yours, where you're suppressing a truth, avoiding a decision, ignoring a part of you that needs to be lived. The psyche registers the misalignment long before the conscious mind admits it, and it sounds the alarm as unease. Jung believed a great deal of modern suffering comes from what he called the unlived life, the parts of ourselves we never expressed, the paths we didn't take, the self we set aside to be acceptable. That unlived life doesn't rest quietly. It presses, it leaks, and very often it announces itself as a nameless anxiety that will not go away, no matter how good things look on the surface. This is why the anxiety so often won't respond to reassurance. You can tell yourself everything is fine, and the feeling knows better. Because on some level, in some real way, something isn't. Not broken, just unlived. Why this matters now? The question anxiety asks is rarely, "What's wrong with you?" It's, "What part of your own life have you stopped living?" For one person, that unlived part is a creative gift never used. For another, a truth about who they are they've never let themselves speak. A relationship they need to leave or to finally enter. A whole direction quietly abandoned to keep others comfortable. The content differs. The pattern is the same. Somewhere you turned away from yourself, and a part of you has been standing at that door ever since, knocking in the only way it can. The anxiety is the sound of that knocking. And what people describe when they finally answer it isn't that the fear vanishes overnight, but that it finally makes sense. That the feeling was never madness. It was a message they'd simply never learned to read. And there is one more form of this worth naming, because it changes how the fear feels. Sometimes anxiety is not the sign of something wrong at all. Sometimes it's the feeling of standing at the edge of something new. Every real growth, every step toward becoming more fully yourself, means leaving the safety of who you've been. And the psyche registers that threshold as fear. The anxiety before the leap, before the honest conversation, before the life you actually want. That's not always a warning to retreat. Sometimes it's the specific fear that guards every doorway worth walking through. Jung understood that individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are, is not comfortable. It asks you to face what you've avoided, to change, to grow past the person you were. Of course, that comes with fear. The trick is learning to tell the two apart. The anxiety that says you are in danger, and the anxiety that says you are about to become more than you were. One asks you to stop. The other, quietly, is asking you to begin. There's a clue worth holding on to here. The body makes almost the same sensations for fear and for aliveness. The quickened pulse, the tightened breath, the electric edge. Which is why the threshold of a real change so often feels like dread. If you only ever read that feeling as danger, retreat, you'll keep turning back at the exact edge of every life worth living. Learning to ask in that moment, is this a warning or is this the doorway, can change the entire shape of a life. Nora, who woke with dread she couldn't trace, eventually found that much of her anxiety lived precisely at the threshold she kept refusing. The honest thing she wouldn't say, the change she wouldn't make. When she began carefully to cross them, the dread didn't disappear, but it changed character, from a wall into a signpost. It had been pointing the whole time at the life on the other side of her own avoidance. So how do you actually work with anxiety this way, without being swallowed by it? It begins by changing the question. Instead of only asking, "How do I make this stop?" you also, gently, ask, "What are you here to tell me?" You stop treating the feeling purely as an enemy and start treating it, at least in part, as a message worth reading. Get curious about its timing. When does it rise? Around which decisions, which people, which avoided truths? Anxiety is often most honest exactly where our life is most out of alignment, so follow it to the place it keeps pointing. And then, where you can, respond to the message, not by obeying fear, but by addressing what it revealed. The truth you've been avoiding, the self you've been neglecting, the life you haven't been living. Often the anxiety eases not when you finally defeat it, but when you begin moving, even slightly, in the direction it was pointing. One honest conversation, one small step back toward yourself. The psyche tends to lower the alarm once it sees you've understood the message and begun, however tentatively, to act on it. But hold two things at once, because this is important. Listening to anxiety's meaning and getting real support for it are not opposites. If your anxiety is severe, relentless, or frightening, please treat that with the seriousness it deserves and reach for help. A good therapist, a doctor. Meaning and support belong together. Understanding the message does not mean suffering through it alone. So here is the question to sit with gently tonight. If your anxiety were not a malfunction, but a message, if it were a part of you trying to say something you haven't let yourself hear, what might it be trying to tell you? Tell me in the comments. I read every reply. And if this gave you a kinder way to understand what you've been carrying, subscribe and stay close. We're learning to listen to the inner life together, one honest piece at a time. Because that feeling you fought so hard to silence may not be your enemy. It may be the part of you that has been trying all along to call you home.